thing that probably makes me an expert in fundraising is how many times I have been told no. Probably far more number of times than any of you have been told no. So that's really all that makes me an expert. But before we start, I want to ask the panelists here a couple of questions. So how much time do you think a CEO should be spending on fundraising, directly or indirectly? Obviously, it's not just the hour you spend meeting that venture capital firm or whatever, but how much time do you think a CEO should be spending on fundraising?
Hi guys, good morning. I think that's a tough question actually, and there's a very simple answer to that. You're always fundraising. Whether you're doing it actively, inactively. If I'm having dinner with someone and I think now subconsciously pitching now, I do this, I do that. So all these become forms of fundraising. I think all of us have a comfort level as to what runway we like. And when you're reaching the point of criticality, then you think, okay, now we need to actively start fundraising. And that's when you kind of amp up your efforts. But you always are. I don't think as CEOs, you always stop. That's your primary responsibility. Make sure that the startup has enough funds to keep going. And that is your core of what you're supposed to do. That allows everything else to happen. If that thing stops, then the whole game stops. So yeah, I'm always fundraising. I don't think I ever stop.
Yeah,
it should be on for you. No?
Is it on? Just go.
Just take the mic. Yeah. This is too loud.
I think they were upping you and probably
Balancing out between us. I think in terms of fundraising, I think early on I was very active in the fundraising journey, and we did our series A, B, and C, as you know, Vani, without an investment bank. So I think I took that as a big learning. So in terms of my time spent, I would say maybe a larger time spent in fundraising and talking to investors. And as part of the fundraising journey, it's not just fundraising, but from all the no's, countless no's that we get, I actually learned a lot through the process about my own business. So I think in terms of fundraising, I agree. We have to continue to, every meeting is essentially a potential fundraise with an investor. But I think as I'm moving forward, I would say maybe just to answer the question, about 50% of the time.
Okay. So I think what I've learned over the years is that you got to think of your company as a going concern. And there are two ways to keep it going. One is to either have stupendous revenues, which keep it going nonstop. Or the other way is to say, how am I going to bridge the gap? So fundraising is about managing every day a dedicated time out for at least one of the founders of the company to think about how is this going to be a going concern in multiple ways, of which capital raise is one part of it.
Okay, yeah. It's working. Maybe a little too well.
Right, so we should get the cell phones also off before we start. Okay. Maybe you kind of already answered this question, but I'll ask it more explicitly anyway. In a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being natural, 5 being something difficult, not in your nature, so to speak, how do you rate fundraising? Are you natural at it? You do it because it's like chores at home, you have to do it. So where do you rate fundraising?
I mean, I divide it in two, right? One is getting investors on board, and the second is getting the deal done. So all the legals and everything else that goes with it. The first part, I actually enjoy it. Every time when I speak to investors, you're learning something new. You're refining a pitch every single time you give it. You're constantly taking feedback. So for me, it's an iterative process. It's a learning process. So I actually enjoy the pitch now. In the beginning, maybe I didn't enjoy it so much, but now it feels comfortable, and that's good. The second part of it, it's a pain. It's something that has to be done, and you're kind of herding sheep through a really narrow path, and then that has to be done. So yeah, I mean, I would say I'm probably kind of a 2, maybe, overall, but yeah.
I would say that the fundraising, the deal-making part, where you're actually speaking to multiple people, hopefully trying to get multiple investors to the finish line, where you can actually decide between some if you're lucky enough. I think on that part, that's where I enjoy the most. I have to say that the process that follows with the documentation and the due diligence isn't as enjoyable. And that's something that I'm fortunate enough to have a co-founder who's highly operationally driven. And so he takes over there to my happiness, and I go back to regular work. So I would say that on a scale of 1 to 5, I enjoy the deal-making part as a 4, and the part that follows as a 2, maybe.
I think you got the rating wrong.
Oh, so okay, fine. The other way around. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's challenging. So it's personally something different that you do from running a business day to day. So that's exciting. It's come very naturally to us for many, many years now. We just got lucky with it, I guess. But in terms of the process that follows later, I think you get wiser with age. So you try and figure out the mechanics of that and find a process to do it, because it is complex. And it changes, the regulations change all the time, and you're dealing with a diverse set of investors who are driven by their own regulations because of where they come from as well. So complexities exist in that process. You can't take away from it, but you just got to smile and just go through it, you know. There's no other way to do it.
That comes easy for you because you're always smiling. I've never seen you not smile. So, you know, just from my side of the table, and I have been on your side of the table also for many years, right? As many years as I have been on this side of the table. You know, the two things that, at least for me, are walk away and because I get irritated with it, is someone saying, I have a term sheet, or I'm getting a term sheet, you have 1 week, and this is our first meeting. And 9 out of 10 times, I know they're bluffing, okay? It's hope and a prayer, and maybe they're getting something, maybe they're not, but, you know, and that's the first step from an honesty perspective that doesn't work. The second is, so-and-so firm said they can close in 30 days, and can you do that? And we can't, not because of us, but just the process itself. It's sort of saying, you know, I don't know, can you have a baby in less than 9 months or whatever? And you know, there's a practicality to how long it takes to close a deal, and you see both ends. I think the fastest I've seen is 45 days, but I've also seen like 9 months when the entrepreneur wasn't expecting it. It's not that they thought it would be a 30-day process, ends up being 9 months, and lots of things go wrong in that time in trying to close deals. So, you know, what is sort of your average closing time been? You can pick any series, doesn't matter. What has been your average closing time?
Oh, I love this one.
Go first then.
Was it 2 days with Kstart?
Well, okay. All right.
Let's skew the average a bit.
I wasn't planting that question, so don't skew the curve, okay? Kstart is different because it's not a full fundraise. It's a convertible note, right? So we are not agreeing to anything other than, and it's a standard term sheet, and we say take it or leave it. We don't negotiate. We just say it's a convertible note. Everything gets decided when you do a Series A. So that's easier, right? So.
No, but it happened.
Yes.
Right, so
good, touche, good point.
it's important to make it, say that happened, right?
Major
And
brownie
that was a great
points.
experience. It's an outstanding experience. We've had 2 days. I think the second pre-series A was 30, and the next one was 45 days. So pretty much. But the paperwork takes time, but at least everybody...
But end to end, it has to be money in your bank.
Money in your bank can be anywhere up to 90, 95 days sometimes. It takes time. With each increasing number of board members and investors, it takes time. Yeah. Second round, I think, was 60 days, and then 90 days. Yeah.
I think, Vani, I have a more fun answer. So just to give you a small anecdote, because of what Vani said, is that in our Series A, we had multiple VCs come and give us term sheets. And I went to Vani with the same point, saying that, look, one VC is giving us, saying that 30 days, 45 days, we're going to be closed, guaranteed. And she basically told me, you'll go learn a lesson and come back to me, which I did. So I think 3 months after we signed with that VC, I'm not going to take names, but with that VC, 3 months after we signed, it still wasn't closed. And so we ended up understanding that's not going to work out, and I went back to Vani, and she said, okay, now that you're more settled, we'll now start the process. And so for me, the Series A was about 6 months. Series B was similar, maybe 4 months or 5 months. Series C was the first time that we actually got a signed term sheet and the same investor put money in the bank. So I think that was about 3 months. So we're getting better. And I hope that our average of 4 months now will come down to maybe 3 months.
But, somebody's loss is somebody's gain. The 2 times that the signed term sheet wasn't the investor who ended up on the shareholding turned out to be Kalaari's advantage, because both times that happened to Harsh, we were able to continue to reaffirm our investment, and that's been fantastic for Kalaari. So
I appreciate that. I think it's, on that note, I think one of my biggest learnings personally was that to focus more on the individual rather than the brand only. And so, working with Kalaari and especially Vani has been really great. She could have come back to me and said, I told you so, now we don't want to do it, but she's been really helpful throughout the journey.
Okay. I was just trying to calculate, and I was thinking board meetings, because when you get a term sheet and you go to tell your board that, hey guys, I have a term sheet. And so for the current round that we're in, I think we had a board meeting in Jan, and the quarter before, I think we said that we have a term sheet coming, or it's come. And it's been 2 board meetings, which makes it like 6 months. And hopefully, well, God willing, we'll sign in the next 10 days. It's 10 days now. So
this time, I believe.
Yeah. So that's 6 months there. Before that, look, we're in the content space. Content, by definition, is not a sexy VC space. There are very, very few VCs. There are maybe 3, 4 in the country who believe, and one of them is sitting here. And we've never really had this frenzy where people are chasing you and term sheet after term sheet, and you're picking and all that. I think this time we've had a little bit of joy of that. So when you're in a sector like that, then you kind of are really you're building on your fundraise. You're kind of getting one person in, then you're getting second person in. It's like a layer cake that you're building. So it's a difficult process, and it takes time. Our second round, we had the first close with X amount, then we had the second close with a little bit more coming in. So it just kept building up. So it's kind of a rolling stone that keeps gathering capital as it goes along, and that's okay. So that's why I think it takes time. The round prior to this, I think we probably took 9 months from end to end with all the money in, and that's okay. I mean, I have no issues with that as long as the company is running, certainty is there. Obviously, it's a time sink, but then that's the way, that's your job. So don't stress so much about trying to do it really quickly, because that way you just end up either making a bad mistake, taking a bad term sheet, or just unnecessarily putting pressure on yourself. So you just really have to just breathe your way through the process. And yeah, 9 months, 6 months, it's getting better, slightly.
As long as your expectations are matched, if you go into it thinking that I will fundraise in 60 days and it turns out 6 months, and you haven't kept the buffer to be able to, have the runway for that, that's when you're stressed, inordinately, right? When I first, all the years that I had fundraised for my own company or post that for our own fund when we have fundraised, and we too fundraise, by the way, much like you, and our process is even more brutal in how it works. So it's not that we are just enjoying the joy of giving out checks and we don't know the pain on the backside. So there is some empathy for fundraising, by the way. But we have never used a banker. Part of that comes from sort of, in Silicon Valley, nobody really uses a banker. They use a banker for an M&A or something like that, but not really to fundraise, and maybe for billions of dollars, but not in Series A, B, C, D, E even. So when I first came to India in 2006, 2 things were, for me, a bit jarring. Maybe 3 things. One is, every company had a banker, which means that the rawness of the company was kind of lost, polished, glossy, presentations, but it wasn't necessarily the true voice is what I felt. And I know, at least for myself, I'm not looking for a glossy presentation. I'm looking for that, raw insights of the founding team that we want to back. But the glossy presentation is probably not as bad as the banker sitting along with the company in every meeting. That was, at least for me, a little difficult because we want to hear the management team. And the final and the worst thing is the banker does the entire pitch and the CEO doesn't. And that's so new to me in the sense that it only happens in India. And I'm always baffled why the CEO makes that choice, especially in this venture ecosystem that simply, absolutely does not work in your favor, however brilliant your business plan. The moment a CEO gives control to the banker to do the pitch, generally for me, I either tell, and this happened only even last week, I said to the CEO, can I hear from you and not from the banker? And the CEO took over the pitch. But sometimes when they don't, then it's just a question of how fast can I end this meeting without hurting feelings, because we are definitely not investing in that situation. So I have a reverse question out of that for you guys, right? Choice of banker, no banker. How do you think about it, stage-wise and philosophy-wise?
Okay, I'll address it slightly differently. Bankers want your business. So they will always do whatever it takes to enamor you and get you there and court you so they can make some fees. But I don't think it's the best route to take. Our personal experience has been that, one, when we tell our story, we get a good feedback. We know exactly what we're saying, what is our business, our passion comes out. We state the story to ourselves to see whether it's sellable, what is going wrong and what is going right. So I would always believe that we should sell our own story. Any route. M&A, I agree with you. It's complex. So you would need a banker. But otherwise, no way. Always ourselves, the team.
Yeah, we had bankers pitch us all the time, and that's their job, to try to get business. But I think our series A, B, and C, we did ourselves without a bank, because I think the amount you learn purely from the process of your own company, like I said. Because at your own company, with your own group of people, there's group bias. So you end up not looking at a lot of metrics that when you go through the process, through due diligence, you actually understand not just why does an investor or a potential investor want that metric, but what that metric means for your business, how that metric scales up or doesn't scale up. And these are significant learnings that I would strongly encourage all founders to go through. At our stage now with a potential Series D, we've actually run out of our VC kind of portfolio, if you may, right? The kind of check sizes we are looking at are at PE level only. And so at this stage, we've gotten a banker on. Also because there are too many parties now, and the process would take a strain on our management team. But again, even in meetings with all our potential investors, the management team always pitches. The banker's literally sitting there, and they will only take over once we have a signed term sheet, which then they can get through to money in the bank.
I like control. So I don't think I could sit in a room and hear someone else pitch my company. It would just be, I don't think, for me personally, possible. Round before the current one, one of our other advisors suggested that we go interview bankers to pitch PopXO. I literally met maybe 6, 7 bankers, and one of them finally we brought to Vani to see how he pitches. And I think that was the most difficult meeting I've ever sat through, and it just was not happening. I think in the middle of it, we said, look, this is not going to work out, and thank you so much for your time. It's your baby. You are the best person to pitch it. You're the best person that can turn your pitch on a dime if need be, commit to something that only you can commit to. The banker cannot make any calls on your part. The banker cannot read the room and change something in the presentation, or even like a point of view. Even you might do that, right? As a founder, you have the flexibility to do all that. and if it's a relationship that you will have with the person giving you the money, right? So how you set the tone in that meeting is very important. You set the tone for it. I've never seen the logic for someone else pitching it. Even if in the future, if you had to kind of get a banker involved, you'd never let them talk unless they absolutely had to, right? So yeah, it's your baby, control it. And if you're an entrepreneur, that's what you like most. I don't think I could sit in a room where someone else was talking about Puppexo. It just would not happen. So for me, it's a complete no. In the future, maybe, but yeah.
But I'll say that there are probably two places where I've seen good bankers add value, and sometimes, depending on the company that I'm on the board of and how much bench strength that they have, I do advise them to get a banker, but for two reasons. Not to pitch their company. First, there is a prep work, and the team just simply doesn't have the bandwidth or the depth to do that, right? And some companies do, some companies don't. And if you don't, the banker can, parachute resources, a couple of analysts, associates to pull through all the, metrics, clean up all the projections. The worst thing you could do is have lots of mistakes that haven't been totally detailed, vetted, because it's a key question of your credibility. Sometimes people will tell me a number that's their revenue, and my instincts go up and I dig deeper into it, and actually it's not their revenue, it's their booking, and sometimes it's not even their booking, it's their lead pipeline. So, you don't want to make mistakes like that just because it may feel good to say, my revenue is whatever, 10 million ARR, and it turns out that is not really the case, and worse yet, if you actually don't know the difference between booking and revenue. And, it's just maybe simple things, but it matters to show how you are managing your company, the depth and the detail. And I do think that sometimes young companies don't have the bench strength internally. Maybe you don't have a CFO or a finance person who can work with you closely on this or otherwise. And so a banker can add value in the prep material, no doubt. So that's a choice you should make depending on, truthfully what you have or don't have as leverage of resources within the company. I 100% agree that you should control the pitch and you should pitch your company. Maybe it's a good pitch, maybe it's a bad pitch. If it's a bad pitch, you will learn it quickly from the feedback, and that's the only way it's going to work. A bad pitch, what is a bad pitch? A bad pitch is when you are not able to succinctly communicate your point to the other person in a way that they can understand. And it's a communication wavelength. So you will have to figure out what is wrong in this that I am not able to communicate. By the way, all the pitches I did in the beginning in 96 time frame, I realized I was talking like an engineer and a geek about my product, but I wasn't talking what mattered to the other person. What's the benefit of this? What's the company? What is the target group? And those were all things I had to learn because I was a product manager and I never had exposure to other things, but only through pitching, you kind of see what is not working here for the other person to understand and be critical, self-critical and learn, right? But there is also the other side, after the pitch is done and somebody is interested in you, the process part, again, it requires a lot of hand-holding, like Harsh said, there, maybe A and B are okay, but beyond that, there is a complexity of various parties and keeping everybody in sync and so on and so forth. By the way, large companies do this internally. If Cisco is acquiring a company, they probably aren't hiring a banker. They probably have, they do whatever, 500 acquisitions or something in a year. So, they have a whole set of people who can handle this, but you probably may or may not. So if you don't, then trying to have a banker who will handhold the back-end process, but absolutely always keeping you in sync, because bankers also can hijack the process just like lawyers can, being very overzealous, and then deal falls through before you know because somebody is upset with somebody. But a good banker won't do that. And I think having that in control is something that a banker can also add value. But moving on, right? Do you always control the pitch, or where do you make room for co-founders in the fundraising process? And I think I ask this because many times young companies look at fundraising as a democratic process that all co-founders, and sometimes we'll have 4 or 6 co-founders, each one will take turns slide by slide. And that also doesn't really work for us on the other side of the table, by the way, just to clear it. And each of you have co-founders, or at least have had before. What have you taken from how you involve or don't involve your co-founder, and that can have, relationship repercussions, maybe? So, thoughts? Harsh, why don't you start?
So I have only one co-founder, and he prefers also, like we've spoken about it openly, I think that's very important to have that open communication between co-founders on what each of you bring to the table and what each of you are expected to do. And he prefers to let me do most of the talking, which in our case, if you see, I do the talking, he does the work, right? It works out pretty well. So in our pitches, I think 80% of the time I'm pitching, but it is very, very important to have your co-founder also put in at least 20-25% of that pitch, because eventually y'all are a team. And it is very important for any potential investor to also get to know your entire co-founding team, not just that one person, because they're going to work with that entire co-founding team. So yeah, I think we do about 75-25 or 80-20.
Very, very interesting. It's very similar. We're 3 of us. So I think one is a technical co-founder. The other 2 are the business guys. So business, one of us decides to take, but usually the CEO takes the role. And we cover I cover pretty much what's business and what do we see as potential and why we're here. And the technical co-founder specifically covers just the product roadmap from a technology perspective. If required, the third co-founder will chip in. But otherwise, it's just 75% of business conversations and 25%.
Did it naturally evolve? Did you have explicit conversation about it?
Yes. So I think preparing for a pitch is very complex business. It takes days of effort to prepare a pitch. And we usually have, and this is what I try and do, is I bring in, first we talk about the pitch ourselves. Okay, this is the deck, how are we going to make it, what are we saying, what's the storyboard? We agree on the storyboard. But then the pitch itself has to be practiced. And you have independent third parties listen to your pitch, maybe friends, other people. So you can then slice it and make it so precise that it looks very smooth. And to do that, you will automatically realize that, hey, I don't need to speak here. I should shut up. So each one knows what and when, what to speak and what to say. And that probably is a 1 month effort at every stage of your conversation, of every stage of the company itself. And that's when you realize, actually, and then you do it in front of a mirror, it's even more damaging. Then everybody cuts their piece down to focus. It has to be agreed between the co-founders, and there's no egos out here. It is more about the business, and that's how it flows.
Okay.
We know the insights of every company, and that's why we go
Okay, so I started PopExo with a co-founder, Namrata. We both were in it from day one, and we had a really good, strong run together. And last year, she decided to move on, and she was having a baby. She wanted to have the baby in London, and Delhi air is bad. There were multiple reasons. So I've been on both sides of this discussion. I can tell you the before and the after. I think the most important thing is the other side of the table should see you as one strong, cohesive, connected unit. The story should be the same, and that takes practice, that takes conversation, and that takes discussion prior that this is how we will do it, and of course you dry run it, you do the whole thing. If the potential investor senses that these guys are not syncing up together, the deal is done, right? You're not going to get anywhere. So that is very important, right? All of us are human beings. We all have, you could be disagreeing with them over something, arguing over something, and that's the job of co-founders. You have the co-founder because you have another person to argue back, right? So none of this ever comes into the room when you're pitching. It just seems like you are completely agreed. Whatever stance you've kind of argued out, you both kind of believe in that. That's important. I've done pitches with a co-founder, and I've now done pitches without a co-founder. What, in my view, the VC is looking for is clarity and control. So whether it's a team or a single person, if that's the feeling of confidence that you're able to give, it works, right? So whichever way it works for you, do that. But just make sure that you know your story, you're pitching it with great confidence, you know your numbers. Yeah, I mean, I don't know which one I prefer now, because now the pressure is entirely on one person. It's always good to have someone in the room with you when you have a whole bunch of other people sitting there. Yeah, I think the CEO is the CEO, and it's not a title to be taken lightly. And I think you really have to own up to the title. Whoever's the CEO should lead the pitch. Where required, other founders should step in. But yeah, one person controls the room, and I think that's very important.
And as you know, we brought Kalaari companies to the stage here today to share their experiences. So this question, I want this to be authentic and not in the context of you being portfolio companies of Kalaari. So what is it that you thought was most important in the investor you were picking, investor or investment firm that you were picking? And, you know, and I genuinely don't want this to be about your support for Kalaari, which I know we have gotten in generous proportion. But, you know, prior, you've done many rounds, you know, besides the first round that Kalaari led. So as an overall, what is it that you have individually looked for and found or have not found, right? Maybe you have a list of 10 things. It's like getting married and you get 8 or 9 and maybe, but never 10, so.
I can go, yeah, sure. The things that I think we looked out for, and this is also, like I said, learning, right? I think in my Series A, we were honestly looking for like the biggest brand we could get. So, you know, get a good brand, and that brand will add value to your company by just, it doesn't matter who comes on board, it doesn't matter the partner's name or what they've done, just get the best brand you can get. And I think that was our big mistake. That was a big learning for us. Since then, I think we've whittled down to saying, who's a partner that's going to be joining us? What have they done? Which other companies are they working with? Because I think a lot of the value that board members provide you are because they have an experience and expertise they have large breadth. So they might have depth in one area, but they have a lot of breadth with a lot of different kind of portfolio companies. And that adds a lot of value to your board discussions. So I think the breadth of the partner, and actually very importantly for us also going in future rounds, we figured that it's also, I mean, I'm being completely honest here, but it's also very important that how much leeway does that partner have in that firm. So it's, you know, there are multiple partners in every firm, and each one does have a certain leeway. If that partner is a founding partner in that firm, it's better, because there are some tough decisions that need to be taken at different times. And if your board member can just stand firm at their VC firm and stand up for you, then that helps a lot. But if the partner that's on your board has to fight their way within the VC firm to make some pretty bold decisions, then it's difficult. So I think the partner by far is the most important. Their breadth, their maybe power, for a lack of a better word, but in their own firm are the two things I would say we look out for the most.
Yeah, so I think the process starts a little before a lot of research. You need to research the firm. Every firm has some hypothesis of investing. So it's not necessarily that everybody would be interested in your space. That's most important. 2 is within the firm, who's saying what about areas which are similar to where you want to go, or space, or people who are willing to think and take bolder bets or standard bets. You have to know that. Who's the partner who's driving that in the firm? There are enough resources out there, right from the funded to enough, but always talk to portfolio companies. Some way or other get to people, research them out. It's always about the person. Like, you know, I would agree with you that you need to focus on one person in the firm who you think is going to take a bet and who agrees with your hypothesis at a very early. Because when you're starting at seed stage, it's a hypothesis that this may work. So your hypothesis, you want to look there, but you also have to look at the person in front of you and say, I'm going to get an additional person on my management team. Am I going to get that sounding board? Am I going to get a guide Am I going to get somebody who will fill in a gap that I don't have today? And how much time will this person have? That's very important, right? So think through how many board members, how many board seats this person is sitting in, because you are actually, it's all about going for this person. And it's an additional co-founder in the team, but you have to think that way, but that means you have to be open and focused on to listen to that person as well. So I would focus on the person first, across firms, and then I would come to a firm. That would be the first choice for me.
I'll take a slightly contrary view here. When you're first starting out your first institutional fundraise, it's tough. I mean, the word no, all of us are very, very familiar with, and you all will also be equally familiar with the word. When you're trying to get your first term sheet, it's always a very kind of exciting, important moment, and you really feel that you've achieved something there. With us, what happened was we blinked in a way. Sometimes you blink too soon, right? Getting on a plane to do your last meeting, and literally on the plane say, okay, fine, we've been arguing about this for a while, but fine, we'll take the deal that you're giving. And you land, you do a great meeting, and you realize, had you not done that, you probably would have gotten a better deal, right? So go with your gut instinct, actually. Like if your gut is really saying don't do it, it's probably telling it to you for a reason. And then just kind of allow yourself a little bit more time to kind of get other possibilities on the table. The point about how much power your board member has within their own firm is extremely important. Because sometimes, it's happened to me multiple times, and I'm not just saying it because Vani is sitting next to me. I've gone to her and said, listen, I'm not feeling good about this. I don't know what to do, and help, right? At that point, because Vani can within the firm say, okay, I'm there, I'll back you, the delta will be made up. It's extremely important that we have that, I have that comfort that my board member can back me in a big way where required. So definitely getting someone on your side who has that power to do is extreme. I mean, I don't even put a value on a thing like that. So sometimes you have a choice, sometimes you don't have a choice. And I mean, that's the way it is. Where you have a choice, then you look at the person and say, can I work with this person? Can this person guide me? Can I trust this person to kind of hold on to my corner if need be? And that's important, right? So where the choice is there, absolutely go after the person, but sometimes the choice is not there, and you've got to make the best of what's offered to you at that point. And it's a tough thing. I mean, sometimes a company it's a hot company and lots of people are after. At that point, of course, you have the entire flexibility in the world to cherry pick the people that you're going to work with, but sometimes it's not the case and you make the best of it, right? So, but where you can, optimize for the person that you want to be working with, and whether that person can guide and advise you, and whether you can trust that person.
So I want to add a nuance to this, and then we'll open it now for Q&A from any of you. But I want to share a nuance here. I don't think you should just target a senior partner or a founding partner or someone you think has power and leverage in the firm. I'll tell you why. Because if I look at our own firm, for example, I'll probably do 3-4 deals in a year. Rajesh probably does 3-4 deals in a year. And sometimes I just don't have time to look at a deal, just because besides sitting on the boards and meeting young companies, which is probably what I enjoy the foremost, but much like each of you enjoy foremost something, but there are a lot of things organizationally that probably take up 70% of your time. I bet you that what you particularly enjoy doing, why you started the company, as the company grows, you're probably doing that 30% of the time, and as the company grows even more, that time reduces. So it's not that different, right? There's lots of other things that take up time than meeting young companies, mentoring entrepreneurs, which as much as I think we enjoy, and that's why you get into this profession. So then maybe the senior person is right or wrong for you because they may not have time. If they don't have time, then there is no point because you're not going to make progress anyway. So I think what you need is an ally, whoever that ally is, because honestly, I can tell you internally within the firm, it's less about the power. It's more about really the conviction of the person inside to be an ally and say, look, the company is going through a difficult time. Obviously, people have to ask for reasonable things. If I went to my firm now and said, we must put $20 million into Priyanka at Popexo.
Please?
The answer would be no. So from the firm, right? So it's not that anybody has unlimited power within a firm. Every firm has checks and balances, and that's true. It's like, for example, each of the entrepreneurs have tremendous flexibility on what they do with their company, but let's say one of them came and said, I'm raising $50 million in debt. Even if somebody was willing to give them, the board will say no, right? So there are checks and balances to everything. So no one has unlimited power, okay? They have some flexibility. But I would tell you that what is far more important, and sometimes that may be a principal or a young associate or a new partner into the firm who has time for you, conviction for you, and will be an ally for you internally in the firm. Now, sometimes they may not have the conviction to thump the table for you. That's different. But whichever firm you go to, the person you work with is important. And seniority of that person matters, but matters secondarily to whether they really believe and are going to give you the time for you. If you think about Lee Fixel, for example, he was fairly young, not even yet a partner when he did his first deal with Flipkart. So that would be, he was definitely not the founding partner of Tiger Global for sure. Nor was he really a senior partner there. He was just a young person in the firm, but he had a conviction about India. He thumped the table, company makes progress. Power grows with success. There is no such thing as absolute power for anyone at any given time, right? So it continues on success, and there are some people who are on the rise, and it's for you to discern whether you think this person is on the rise or not, and if they are, I think you should align with them. But my slight difference to what you heard from the three of them is you first need someone who will be your ally and truly believes in you to, fight for you, not just internally in the firm. Do they pick up the phone and talk to a potential investor and make a very strong pitch for you? Not with you. That's another mistake, by the way. Like the banker, sometimes I see people bringing a board member. That just means that you don't feel strong enough to come into the meeting yourself. So it's not in that context, but in a private context, do they pick up the phone and call someone at another firm and say, this is what I see. Yeah, I know the company is doing well or not doing well, but I really believe in this entrepreneur. Here is 5 reasons why. Are they really as much being your ambassador and taking the time to do that? And that, I think, is what you should look for when you look for somebody. But with that, we have time for maybe 5 questions. Maybe less, let's see. Can we see what questions anybody has for the panel here? I'm sure they are, but people take time to warm up. So there is one hand in the back there, Abhinav.
Definitely don't wait till you're nearing the end of your runway, because as we all said, the process takes time. The more runway you have, the more power you have to negotiate, and the more comfortable you'll feel pitching, because when you're nearing the end, your back's against the wall, and that time a lot of your power goes away. So you have to constantly even if you're not actively fundraising, you have to think, if I have to start fundraising tomorrow, am I keeping potential investors, or am I taking them along on the journey with me, right? So even if you're not actively fundraising, you're talking to them and things like that. And when you have to pick up the phone and say, hey guys, we're thinking about raising, then they're already prepped for you as well. So yeah, definitely don't wait till you're ending, your bank balance is going down. At least give yourselves 6 months,
Yep,
is what you'd say? 6 months at least before your runway is ending.
I would say 12 months. At the minimum 12 months, because this is a process. There are numerous things in this industry which are never in your control. And especially if you're in a B2C business, it's even more complex. 12 months is short. It will disappear. So think before 12 months.
I think
I take that actually, yeah.
Yeah. I think also, the fundraising part, I think 6 months, what we're talking about is almost to a point where your pitch is good. Your pitch is solid, and you're looking at signing people on, there's interest, Then there's the term sheet, then there's documentation, and money in the bank comes later. But I think for my example, we pitched, I think, for about a year and a half for our Series A. So I had a lot of learnings, let's just say, for a year and a half to refine the pitch. And then when we signed on, it took 6 months. So you definitely can't raise money, you can't go out fundraising when you need it, because that's not going to happen. And also, I mean, VCs understand this just way better than entrepreneurs do, right? What your runway is. And it is a game at the end of the day. And yeah, it is, right? At the end of the day, you're negotiating, and if you allow yourself to be in a position where you don't have much negotiating power, you will lose out on that negotiation. And once you have not a great documentation, it's a lot of work to actually fix it in the next round. Yeah. So whatever you sign up, the terms that you sign up in your Series A or seed or whichever your first institutional round is, those terms will carry on with you, and it'll be very hard to get rid of. So be very, very thoughtful about those terms.
You know, that sounds great, right? And some of you are sitting there and thinking, but, you know, I don't have 12-month runway, and what should I be doing? So that sounds like everybody here. so you know, I think, but I want to give you a different point of view. I remember my Series A, like yesterday, with a lot of clarity. In those days, which was now what, 1995, so whatever that was. So I remember the situation where the documents were all done. We were supposed to sign, and so we were meeting to sign. And when I got there, they had made many changes to the document. And when I looked at that, and this was already sort of 5 p.m., the idea was we would, and I was in their office since 4 p.m., we were just supposed to sign. And in fact, my daughter was in daycare. It was my turn to pick up. I was supposed to go pick her up. It's 5:15. Documents are not still signed, and they give me the set of documents, and everything is changed. And I'm thinking, and daycare closes at 6. So, you know, how is this all going to work? Call a neighbor, get your kid picked up. All that stress to, you know, signing documents, but which maybe most men don't need to face, that balancing act. But you know, but the point was, I made an instant decision. I wasn't going to sign the document, and I had 1 month of payroll left, right? And one part of you is led by fear, and yesterday you saw the Fearless Collective, and Shiloh, who's a young girl, really, 24, and she is more fearless than most other people I see. Fearless is, you know, just confronting your weaknesses, right? And so one point is, I have 1 month of payroll left. What choice do I have? I want to sign this, or I need to sign this. But I also felt that if I signed it, I would resent this partner forever, and this was Series A, and this is a long relationship, and maybe they are fine with it, but something would corrode in me, and I would not have a good relationship with this person, and that would continue to eat into you, and it'll make you do things, you know, that you yourself won't be proud of, because it's driven by a little festering, and that's whatever you do, you need to make peace with it. And if I can't make peace with it, then I've not done right by them or by myself. So I stood up and left. I said, you know, I'm not going to sign these documents. And in fact, the partner then said, well, what are you going to do? You have no money. But that's precisely what I didn't want in a partner that was going to come into a Series A. You know, things, and sometimes you have to have the courage to sort of say, yeah, I don't have a 12-month runway. I don't have a 6-month runway. And we'll figure out how to make it work. Maybe it's you don't take salary. Maybe it's I'm not advocating it. You pull money from your credit card. I don't know what it is. It's a fine balance that only you know as a founder. You know, take some money from friends. Neither would I advocate that. But, you know, dire situations require dire measures. But I think what is important, though, is to have courage of conviction to stand for what you believe is right. And eventually, in fact, just to give a good story, I did go to someone who came in as a Series A investor, and I said, look, this is what happened. I walked away, And the thing that's important to me is that it's a fair and equitable relationship. I'm not unreasonable, I'm not greedy, but I need to feel that we are both on the same side, that we want to build real value here. And what ended up, even though obviously I had no leverage because there was no money in the bank, but your moral leverage can also be a huge leverage that you have. So don't forget that. So, I got a very, very fair term sheet. And this other party didn't try to take advantage and gave us a very fair term sheet. So in general, I would say that at least at Kalaari, and I know this is true not just for Kalaari, other investors also, if they are reasonable investors, are not looking to drive a huge advantage just because you are at a disadvantage. Because I know if I do that, you'll remember there's no reason why you will continue to give me goodwill, in future where you have the leverage and I don't, right? So we, and I think other firms also don't necessarily, I'm not saying this is universally true. It is absolutely correct. It's not universally true, but it's also not zero that, someone will take advantage of you just because you don't have leverage at this moment. I think there is a huge value to your own moral courage and leverage that you have. One last question.
So we are in the process of raising funds right now, and the question I'm going to ask is very relevant to us. I also understand that there is no good or fixed answer, but since three of you have been gone through the process of fundraising, so would love to hear your perspective. How do you negotiate or arrive at a fair valuation when you do fundraise?
I'll take that if you don't mind. I don't think in early stage tech especially, there's ever a fair valuation. There's only what is agreed upon, right? I think as entrepreneurs, we always think we're all building billion-dollar companies. And you'll always want a higher valuation. And as an investor, I'm sure you want to come in as soon as you can and as early as you can so that you keep more of the upside. So I think it's just, there's nothing like a fair valuation. Some companies can go for 5 times their revenue, some can go for 50 times their revenue. I think it's all a matter of demand and supply. Are you talking to one investor? Do you have one investor that's interested in you? You may get a better valuation if you have 5 investors, but I would say driving your negotiation with valuation in perspective is less helpful to your company. I would focus a lot more on the terms. I would focus a lot more on the terms. As long as you get a valuation which you're comfortable with, I wouldn't optimize on valuation, I would optimize on terms.
It's a very nice answer.
Also think about your next round, right? Say today you're raising at a particular valuation. Say you want a really high valuation, you get it. Then your revenue for after that will have to justify the valuation, and remember you'll raise in the future as well. And then you'll have to make a lot more money to get the valuation upside that you want. So sometimes getting a super high valuation too early can be detrimental, at least in my view. I don't know what Vani thinks in that. It can be detrimental to you as well. So again, terms, say they give you a great valuation, but they take a 2x participation, right? That's going to be kind of really bad for you when the payday comes. So yeah, terms for sure, and super high valuation don't mean anything till the whole kind of the dance ends, right? So it doesn't matter.
The key is not about fair valuation. Key is knowing what the market is willing to pay for anything at any time. And what the mistake I see is someone comes in, says, I'm raising 10 million and at a 50 million valuation. And we won't even look at the deal further because that's not what we think is the right valuation. So if the company can get that, great. No problem, right? Then we misjudged it. And that happens too, by the way, sometimes, right? And when Ola came to us for a Series A, we thought it was very highly priced and we passed on it. Obviously, we were wrong, right? That's hindsight. But we have to do what we believe is right and fair, and at that moment, it's one person's judgment. But the other side that I see is the company believes that they should go with a higher number because then they'll discover what the valuation is, and that never works in your favor because it feels completely out of line. And in fact, we had one company in our portfolio that went to people and said, we're looking to raise at $100 million. And I had 3-4 VCs, and we didn't even know they were putting that number out there. And I had 3-4 VCs calling me saying, did they mean 100 crores or 100 million? What were they saying? You know, because I couldn't believe it that the company was saying 100 million. And obviously, the company took 2 years and couldn't raise money because nobody was going to put money at 100 million. And when we talked to the founders, their view was, well, if we say 100 million, maybe we'll close at 30. Doesn't work like that, right? Then this is no different than you putting your company in a sabji mandi, right? So, and most of the VCs who were actually interested in the company walked away. And the company went back into the market. By the way, they closed at 35 million after 2 years. What's the loss to your company for having lost that much time? And they didn't necessarily raise from top tier VCs who were interested at one point, right? But remember, there's a relationship building that you can't be in a zone that if most people say you're unreasonable, one or two say, no, this is not a fair, and somebody else tells you this is fair, then good, your instinct was right on, right? But if they say this is not a right valuation and almost everybody kind of withdraws, your ability to go back into the market, your leverage is gone because your moral leverage is gone. You can't go back into the market honestly and say, now I'm ready to take for 30 million because nobody will take you seriously. That's the problem. You know? One last question.
Thanks. My name is Abhinav. I sometimes, not always, hear the answer to this question, how much should you raise is as much as you can, but I think all of us are seeing what too much of money can do sometimes to the startups. I'm just curious to hear from the panel, if you ever came across a scenario where you were raising money and realized or somehow decided that it's too much, we don't want this much because of high valuation or you had revenue growth or something.
Not experienced as yet.
We negotiated down. Yeah, we did actually. For our Series C, we wanted to raise X, and because we haven't disclosed our numbers, but we wanted to raise X, and we actually had term sheets to put 2X in, and we negotiated down to 1.5X. And that was a multiple reasons. One was that we didn't want the pressure of having to burn that much money over the next 18 months, and we weren't sure whether we can justify doing that the right way or not. We were not looking at treasury management where we just sit on all this stockpile of cash. Yes, we were happy to raise more than we wanted. So I'm not saying we stuck to X. We did take 1.5X, but we also wanted to make sure we didn't over-dilute for the future, for making sure that, consciously we want to try not being one of the founders if possible again, who have less than 10% in the company. There's nothing wrong with that. If you build a $10 billion company and you have 10%, you've done a decent job, right? But we wanted to make sure that we don't take excess money because that puts us in a spot where VCs are not going to be okay saying that, you're saying that I've put this money in my bank account, I'm earning 6% fixed deposit. So that's not going to help.
So we started with X, ended up with little around, say, 2X, and then the 3X was on the table, and we are still arguing on that one. So it's a fluid situation, right? It's always good to have more money. If you've been at the end of a short, I've been at the end of a short runway as well. The last thing I want is, I think the Series B, the docs were being signed, December came and nothing happened, and we had to wait till January for the money to hit the bank. I didn't pay salaries for a month, although the money was coming, but I couldn't pay salaries because we had no money. Cash, right? That happened. So, really weird things happen. So having money is fantastic, and it makes me sleep well at night. So, yeah, it's tough to say no. Sometimes your advisors will come and say, hey, enough. At this valuation, don't raise any more than that, and then you listen to them as well. So it's a fluid thing. It's a good problem to have. Optimize for security, I think. I optimize for security. I don't like being at the end of a very short runway or I want to be able to pay salaries without worrying about it. So yeah, take the money, take the money.
So, in closing this, I just want to offer a couple of observations. We wanted to put this panel together with companies and CEOs that are at various different stages of their evolution, life cycle, different kind of fundraisings, challenges that they've seen, so that there is a broader perspective they can offer. And just a few observations I would share. Obviously with Ravi and Active, we have been involved from seed stage, which is generally not the case, and that's both of them didn't. Maybe they raised a seed round. Did you raise a seed round? And
Friends and family.
Yeah, friends and family. There's a small seed round, I think. But in both these situations, we were involved in Series A. But a few observations on what I think these companies and hence the CEOs have done right. I think, after the seed round, when there was an inbound interest, much before anticipated, I think Ravi and the team, rather than hold out for the ultimate perfect valuation and amount, just said, it's here, it's inbound, it reduces friction for us, and we won't optimize it. The hassle of time that we need to take out for fundraising, and I think and it was a very wise choice, and many times companies don't do that, and almost, Series B, interestingly, happened in more or less the same way, not actively fundraising, inbound interest, but converting interest into deal is also very important, which means you're always prepared, and you're never fundraising, yet you're fundraising every day, right? So practicing the Zen of that, so to speak, and I think Ravi and team did a great job with it. And much like Harsh spoke, I think Harsh has cherry-picked partners and built a long-term relationship with them, invested into that over a long period, and saying, here are maybe 5 people that I want to potentially be in relationship with, if not this year, 2 years down the road, whatever. And hence, I think because he has invested so much time into thinking about that from a business development activity long before you are going to pitch anything to them, I think he has been able to have that advantage of getting to people and partners that he's interested in, and he's not showing up saying, I have 1 week, say yes or no, right? So long before people need to say yes or no. There may come a time, by the way, they know you enough, they're still not saying yes or no, and you say, look, I need to get a commitment now. But I think he's done a great job of building that depth of relationships. And, sometimes reality check and pragmatism of your company, where you are, and fundraising is very important. And I think many companies in Priyanka space who were maybe even slightly ahead and had seemingly certain advantages, I think today are more handicapped. And PopExo has hence had a chance to leverage and move ahead. I think part of it is because they knew, Priyanka knew from the beginning that this is going to be a difficult fundraise. This is a space she loves, she's in, and you have to gather missionaries, at least in the beginning, for your company. And sometimes that is the case, right? You're not doing something that is populist today. And being that, I think she cast her net wide. If you just go to the 10 people everybody knows, and already their sentiment is not, very positive towards what you're working on, you have to say there are other people in the world, and I think, in fact, she's done a fantastic job of looking for investors, most of who are not in India at all after Series A. Most of your investors have come from Singapore, Philippines, Korea, whatever. I mean, as far as that, right? China, as far as that. And she has had a more difficult job, and remember, without banker, but of spreading her network to really look for investors who understand the space and are willing to make a bet on it. So, I just want to share those observations, and, that diversity of how each of them have approached, their own situations of fundraising is why we wanted these particular CEOs to be here sharing their journey and experiences with you, and, hopefully you can take something home with all of that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Vani.
Thank you.